Hello, and welcome to what I'm calling my fireside chats with Dr. Childress, where I'll be talking about just my various experiences of being in the family courts over the last 10 years. Um, and I've discussed the petition to the APA that I wrote and um, went with some parents to present, hand deliver to the APA and the circumstances around that. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about the 2017 uh, conference, the National Convention of the AFCC, um, the professional organization for family law attorneys and forensic psychologists. And so in 2017, I went back and presented to the AFCC with Dorcy Pruter. And I have the slides up on my Purple Trees website. And then I'll link them, copy of the slides from that 2017 presentation to the AFCC in down below here in this post. And that was a very interesting um, presentation. Notice I haven't ever gone back to the AFCC. I consider the forensic psychologists to be child abusers, essentially, that are participating, including with the child abuse, because of their negligent ignorance and incompetence and professional malpractice. So that's kind of a problem. I'm not sure that they really want to hear what I'm saying or my position, what I would say to the forensic psychologist, citing to the Blue Ribbon Commission out of New York and what they also found. The attorneys, however, the family law attorneys, I think they would be very interested in what I have to say, both about how to cross-examine the mental health testimony, how to cross-examine the pathology on the witness stand. You know, a mental status exam, we don't make a diagnosis of delusional thought disorders by history. We actually, mental status exam pops it out into the session so we can look at it and rated on the brief psychiatric rating scale. And so, yeah, the mental status exam can pop out the delusion. And so, if I kind of teach you how to do that for your cross examination, you could actually, potentially get the person to show the delusion on the witness stand for the judge. And so, I think the family law attorneys will really like me. Plus, taking a treatment oriented approach to the legal issues rather than a custody oriented approach is going to solve the issue for your clients and fix the family pathology. And then how do you hold the mental health people accountable? All this sort of stuff that I could be providing this information to the attorneys, family law attorneys, but I'm not presenting at the AFCC. And the issue for them is ultimately, if they want me to talk to them, they know where I am. They can send me an invitation. I'm not going to be asking for them. But in 2017, I just written Foundations 2015, and the next phase was documenting in the collusion with the child abuse and the unethical malpractice in the family courts from all the various agencies, from all the various organizations that should be doing something and aren't. And there's three primary ones, starting with the AFCC. They are the professional organization for the pathology in the family courts. They have guidelines for custody evaluations and guidelines for everything. And they are considered a subspecialty practice within psychology. So, first off, is to tell them about their unethical malpractice and what the pathology is. Then the second one is the American Psychological Association, who has sort of the umbrella over this new experiment in service delivery, and that's what it is. Forensic psychology is an experiment in service delivery to you guys, a vulnerable population. No one else has a special group of psychologists assigned to them except you. That was an experiment, and you read Stahl and Simon's book, either 2013 or 2020, and they say it's basically a new thing, and they're just kind of developing it, and it's still in its adolescence. Interestingly, their 2013 book Stahl and Simon, they say forensic psychology is still relatively new and it's still in its adolescence. And in 2020, they use exactly the same sentence. They didn't change the sentence one bit. It's still in its adolescence, still relatively new. That means that, like, in almost a decade, they have made zero progress out of being adolescents after what, 30 years of being doing that? It's an experiment, and it's a failed experiment. So they say we're not actually trying to help people; we're actually agents of the court, agents of the institution or something. And so they admit that they're not actually out to try to help parents or solve anything in here. Agents of the state. That's the exact quote. That they say we're agents of the state. Psychologists and doctors are never agents of the state, except like maybe in 1938 Germany or something. We're doctors, we're treatment providers. So they came up with this experiment on you of giving you this special group of psychologists who don't diagnose and don't treat the pathology they work with. Oh my goodness, lucky you. How did you rate that? And so, holy cow, this is just a mess over here. And the fact that they've been using you and your children as guinea pigs for their new approach to treatment that solves nothing is really problematic. And so, again, I'm saying class action lawsuit against the APA and AFCC for experimenting on you on 20 years and destroying your lives because of their failure to follow ethical and standards of practice issues as they get over here. So I know this. I know the AFCC is a problem, and when I use words like problem or pathology, those mean the same things. And when I say the AFCC is problematic, you can just translate that and say the AFCC is pathological. Yeah, they're filled with a bunch of narcissists on the mental health side, and it's captivated them on their grandiosity and their sense of entitlement. Absolutely an absence of empathy. And so this is, they're pathological over there. And so, but I realized in about 2017, I need to document that in as sort of my due diligence under Standard 1.05. And so if people think I'm over here to solve the pathology, no, I'm not. I'm fulfilling Standard 1.05. I'm trying to get you mental health people over here. That's all I'm looking for is to get you the mental health support that you need to be able to protect your children. And holy cow, that's so hard because the mental health people are bottom of the barrel. They are absolutely the worst imaginable. If on a 1 to 100 scale, I put forensic psychologist at -100. Cite to the New York Blue Ribbon Commission that found them dangerous and harmful to children and lack scientific or professional value. So it's just awful what's going on. And I know personally because I read their custody reports. I read all the treatment reports. I'm an expert consultant in this. According to the New York Blue Ribbon Commission, I am that meaningful scrutiny of the forensic psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm from the outside. I apply knowledge instead of opinions. And so I am that meaningful scrutiny. And what do the forensic psychologists do? They sanction me to get me out so they have no meaningful scrutiny of their evaluations. It is a nightmare of professional ugliness, filth over here. And so it's rather distasteful. But I went back to tell them that. And now I also took Dorcy back with me, Dorcy Pruter, because she found me or I found her in the family courts, and she actually solves this with her high road workshop. So she came in and showed me the protocol for that, and I said, "Oh my goodness, that's actually going to work." And so I felt sort of an ethical obligation to bring her back to the AFCC to introduce what she does to them. So the first half of our joint presentation, I presented on the established knowledge, what I euphemistically call attachment-based parental alienation, ABPA. That's the application of established knowledge. There's no new theory here. It's applied knowledge. So I came back and educated psychologists about family systems and about delusional thought disorders and about trauma, because the people who are working with families and delusional thought disorders and trauma don't know anything about any of those topic areas. So you can see that on my slides. The first part of my presentation is educating the mental health people, the psychologists, so that I can have a professional level discussion with them. The second piece, though, is where it all comes down to from my part of the talk, is 4 particular slides. And they were documenting or telling the AFCC that you need to be competent in family systems, delusional thought disorders, personality disorders, and child abuse and complex trauma. And so I have 4 slides in there that are the point of going for me to the AFCC, because it documents that I told them. So that documents for me my discharge of standard 1.05 of the APA Ethics Code when I learned about unethical practice. I'm obligated to do things. So this was under standard 1.05. Now I took Dorcy with me because she has a workshop that will solve the problem, and it fixes it in 4 days, full recovery. So that's really valuable, and that's not what those psychologists are doing. They're messing. So, but she's been over here, and she's kind of struggling to get traction because of the immense disrespect she gets. So I said, come with me, and we jointly presented. And then the second half of we talked about the high road workshop. And so the way I structured the high road workshop, because these are my people, psychologists, is I stayed on the entire time. So I was there for the entire presentation. The second half, Dorcy got up and would tell what she did. And then I'd step over and kind of give a translation into professional speak. And then I'd stand back and she'd talk about the next thing she did. And I'd get over and say, you see how she's doing this now. And so we kind of did back and forth where she described what she did. And then I provided a professional layer to it in explaining them. So we did our professional obligation. We told them what the protocol was, how exactly she accomplishes it. Now she has intellectual property rights to this. Okay, so she developed it, and she's a businesswoman. She's got intellectual property rights. So I'm not going to disclose what she does, and she can disclose how and where she wants. And I think it should be in a professional environment, like a pilot program for the family courts or something. But I'll let her handle further disclosure about the protocol and its success. But she's got data on every single family using parent-child relationship rating scale, ratings on affection, cooperation, and social involvement. And she's got data on every single family that she runs, showing that she actually solves the problem. And the data is ratings from the targeted parent about the child on affection, cooperation, social involvement. That parent's not going to lie about that. And so if the targeted parent is saying the kid's all better, the kid's all better. And she does that for every single program. So we went back and fulfilled our obligation. So in any class action lawsuit, that's the one that I documented in their participatory collusion in the unethical malpractice going on in forensic psychology. We told them they didn't do anything. Now, the interesting part, and we'll talk about this more in the next segment, the interesting part was the response of the AFCC to our presentation. Their response was they withdrew the continuing education units that they gave to the people who listened to our presentation. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you to look at the slides of the AFCC presentation, link down below. You can look at those slides, and what is it that is not got withdrawal of continuing education credits because I talked about family systems therapy? Is that because we told them what Dorcy does with the high road? That does they shouldn't get continuing education for being told what Dorcy does about the high road? No, what happened with that? That's very odd. And they withdrew it after the fact. So like, and people give out C units. It's just kind of at these national convention, everybody gets a C unit when you show up. But they say not for Dorcy Pruter and Dr. Childress. Why is that? I was never informed about it. I was told after the fact. I learned it through kind of the social world that they'd taken away the CE units. And interestingly, it's because Gene Mercer orchestrated this campaign of harassment and lies to the AFCC about us, slandering us, and got a bunch of people to slander us after we talked. Now, they were never at the talk. They don't know what we talked about. They just slandered our professional reputations. And because of the slander, without ever talking with me, without ever informing me of anything, or finding out, I was on the stage the whole time, finding out what we talked about, they pulled the CE units. And Jean Mercer has written about that on her blog. Okay, so she documented herself, and so we'll be talking about that. So the AFCC, in response to Jean Mercer's harassment, pulled the CE units for the people who listened. It didn't hurt Dorcy or I, it just hurt the people who listened to our talk. Because they didn't get continuing education units for that particular hour. But that's kind of a mean thing to do. But it's interesting how Jean Mercer talks about it on her blog, because it seems to be a pattern she uses with people she disagrees with. So in the first blog, she talked about other people that she harasses like this. And then in the second blog, she says, yay, I did it. We got, the CE units. And then she goes around in testimony using the fact that the AFCC withdrew the CE units to imply that the American Psychological Association and the AFCC have reviewed Dr. Childress and Dorcy Pruter and decided that we're unethical and we're not. No, she generated this incident on continuing it, and then she tries to expand it into, again, slandering our professional reputation. And so that's an interesting thing about Jean Mercer. So let's go over to the next little piece and we'll talk about that for a second.